We're going to begin a brand new message series today. We're going to call it the 6 Phases of Faith. If you were to look at the greatest achievers in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, and in modern history, you would see that some of the greatest achievers were some of the biggest failures. If we take modern history and just consider some of the people that we consider great and what made them great. They say that Walt Disney was fired by his newspaper editor because he lacked creativity. That Walt Disney went bankrupt 5 times before he was able to build Disneyland. They say that Michael Jordan, who is perhaps the greatest basketball player of all time, flunked out of and when he was in high school, was not able to make the sophomore basketball team because his coach said that he lacked skill. Beethoven's teacher called him hopeless as a composer. Beethoven's teacher said that he had no creativity and would never be heard from again. It's interesting, we don't know who Beethoven's teacher was, but we've heard of Beethoven. Winston Churchill failed the 6th grade. He did not become the prime minister until he was 62 years old, and his greatest contributions came at 62 when he was a senior citizen. Henry Ford failed and went broke 5 times before he finally succeeded. Why do we like stories like this? Why do we like fairy tales and dream come true stories in movies and books? Well, John Eldridge tells us in his book, Waking the Dead. He said that the original Beauty and the Beast, a creature that no one could bear to look upon, is transformed into a handsome prince. That which is dark and ugly is now glorious and good. It is not the most beautiful outcome of any story to be written. Perhaps that is because it is the deepest yearning of the human heart. Look how often this theme surfaces. Cinderella rises from the cinders to become a queen. The ugly duckling becomes a beautiful swan. The frog becomes a prince. In Hope Beyond Hope, they are all transformed into the very thing that they never thought that they could be. Why are we so enchanted with tales of transformation, of dreams coming true? Why it is the most essential part and the secret of Christianity. In our series, what we're going to discover is that God has a dream for each one of us. And he orchestrates those dreams out of impossible situations to make them possible. That he wants to develop a dream to become a reality. Here's what you need to know about dreams in your life. First of all, you will probably fulfill your dream much differently than what you think that it's going to be fulfilled. Secondly, it will require more from you than you probably would ever dream. And thirdly, it will require the death of many things that will threaten its fulfillment. The fact of the matter is, in this series, we're going to show how God can take a little bit of faith and make it an extraordinary amount of faith. How he can take a little faith and move it, make it into a mountain-moving experience. Jesus said in Matthew, the 9th chapter, he said, according to your faith, it will be done for you. Jesus is saying that you're going to get to choose in life how much God's going to bless you in your life, in your career, in your family, in your relationships, your marriages. According to your faith, it will be done for you. In Mark, the 9th chapter, the 23rd verse, Jesus said, everything is possible for him who believes. Everybody here would like to have a stronger faith. And over the next 6 weeks, we are going to go through this faith-building series, and I'm going to show you that faith is like a muscle, that everybody has one, but some are bigger, some are stronger than others, that it has to be developed. Its weakness or its strength is going to be dependent upon how much you use it, how much you flex it. God uses a very predictable process of building everybody's faith. And if you understand the process that God is going to take you through in building the faith, then you will be able to work with it. You'll be able to quit resisting it and go with what God is leading you to do. But when you don't understand what God is doing in your life, then human nature is we tend to run from it. We tend to hide from it. We try to kill that which we don't understand. And sometimes God is trying to do a dream, He's trying to accomplish what you were put on this earth to do, but because we don't understand it, we destroy it. The results are tragic, especially if God is trying to do that extraordinary dream come true in your life. The question I'm asked more than any other question as a pastor is, why is this happening to me? In this series, we're going to examine the question, why is this happening to me? And when you don't understand the 6 phases that I'm going to show you that is a pattern in the Bible, then things happen as a result of you get discouraged, you become resentful, you start to worry, you become fearful about the future, you become depressed, and most of all, you aren't able to cooperate what God is doing in your life. But when we understand these 6 phases of faith, then what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to say, oh, I know exactly where I am. I'm in phase number 3, or I'm in phase number 4, or I'm in phase 5, but I see that phase 6 is coming. Every single person that God has ever used, both in the Bible and even in modern times, he takes them through these 6 phases that I'm going to give you. That when you know it, you understand that you can cooperate with it. But when we don't understand it, sometimes we resist it, we try to fight it, and sometimes even kill it. So this morning what I want to do is I want to introduce you to what we're going to be talking about over the next 6 weeks. And I honestly believe with all of my heart that these next 6 weeks could be the most important 6 weeks of our church's life and of your life personally. How does God build your faith? Well, if you follow along in the outline, you'll see that it begins with phase 1. He begins with a dream. God always starts with a dream. As a matter of fact, nothing will ever happen in your life that didn't start out as a dream. It starts off as an idea, or as a vision, or as a goal, an ambition, or I've got this thought. That's where it begins. That's where God begins to develop it. There are a lot of examples of this in the Bible. That God gave Noah a dream of building a boat. God gave Abraham the dream of being the father of a great nation. God gave Moses the dream of leading the children of Israel from captivity to a land that flowed with milk and honey. God gave Joseph a dream of being a great leader that would save his people. God gave Nehemiah a dream of building a great wall around Jerusalem. God gave David a dream of building a temple for his glory. How do you know when it is a dream from God and it's just not a crazy idea or just something in passing? Well, the Bible says in Ephesians, the 3rd chapter, that God is able to do far more than we would ever dare to dream or to even ask of. Infinitely beyond our highest dreams, our desires, our thoughts, or our dreams. How do you know it's from God? How do you know what you're about ready to invest the rest of your life in is from God? It will require faith. It will require faith. You see, if you can do it on your own and it doesn't require faith, well, then it really most likely isn't going to be the dream of your life. In 2 churches, in 2 case scenarios, we were both growing to the point where we needed to build a building. And when we brought in Christian architects, in both cases, we said to them, how do we know that we're not just building something that's going to be bigger than we are getting into and that it is of God? And both of the Christian architects told us the same thing. You want to do something so big that when it's finished, that God gets the credit, that God gets the glory, because it would have been impossible for you to have done alone. That's kind of the way the dream is going to be in your life. That if you're going to do something that is just more than just routine, it's going to be bigger than you. That if it happens, it's not going to be because you were the smartest or the quickest or the sharpest witted one. It was because you saw God's plan, God's dream, and you leaned on Him, and it would be your faith that is going to develop, and it's going to strengthen, and you're going to give God the credit and glory at the end of it, and it won't be yours. So, every time that God goes to do something great in a person's life, a church's life, in a movement, it always begins with somebody rising up and saying, I have a dream. I have an idea. I have a vision. And they share that with others. So the very first phase is the dream phase. It takes us to phase number 2, and that's the decision phase. Now, you can have all of the dreams and all of the ideas and all of the suggestions in the world, but unless you decide to act upon it, to invest your life in it, then it really is worthless. A dream is worthless unless you act upon it. James, the half-brother of Jesus, says it like this: you must believe. Do not doubt God. Anyone who doubts is thinking 2 different things at the same time. He cannot decide about anything that he does. The fact of the matter is, according to psychiatrists and psychology, that everybody has dreams. As I sit in this room today, you're thinking about some of the dreams that you've had, some of the thoughts and the inspirations. 100% of everybody has those dreams, those inspirations. But according to psychology, only 1 out of every 10 will ever go for it, will ever decide that they're going to act upon it. So that means 90% of all of the dreams that are out there will die on the wayside. 10%, 1 out of every 10, will be somebody that stands up and says, no, I'm going to invest everything that I have. I'm going to give mentally, emotionally, financially. I'm going to give my life to this. 10% will follow their dreams. During this phase of deciding, you do have to weigh in all factors. Are you willing to do what it's going to take and make the investment? Are you willing to put the time into it? Are you willing to put the money, your reputation? Basically, it will require your life, is what we're talking about. And then the second part of the decision factor is, are you willing to let go? There are some things that you're doing, there are some places that you are, there are some activities and investments and money that you're putting away that aren't necessary. That it's going to require you to stop doing those things, to let go of certain things, and to wholeheartedly focus on this dream. Abraham left his homeland for an unknown destination. Moses left being next in line for being the Pharaoh of Egypt to head up a bunch of slaves. Nehemiah left a very secure job in Persia to go to Jerusalem to build this wall. And in other words, if you want to walk on water, you've got to get out of the boat. Decision making is a lot like a trapeze artist. If you've ever been to the circus and you see the trapeze artist where he starts on this side and he swings out on the trapeze and the other trapeze comes, he's got to make a decision. Am I going to hold on to this bar? And if I hold on to that bar, it's eventually going to take me right back to where I started from. Am I going to hold on to this bar and grab for that one, but hold on to both at the same time? Well, what's going to happen in that case? You're going to be stuck in the middle. You can't go that way, you can't go that, and there's only one way out of it. It's down. But a trapeze artist who is serious about his destination, his dream of flying through the air, goes off of one and has got to make that split second to let go. That's what I'm talking about with decision making, where you let go and then you grab on and then you move on. It is a decision that I have got to leave my past, I've got to leave my comfort zone, and I've got to pursue what God has told me and given me this dream with all of my heart. If you don't let go, you're just going to get stuck in the middle. So we have the dream. We make the decision. Okay, I am going to go for this. I am going to let it go, the past go, and I'm going to give everything I have for this. That takes us to phase number 3, and that's the delay. God will not immediately fulfill your dream. It's not like I got the dream, I made the decision, now boom, here it is. Quite the opposite. Whenever you make the decision, He will always, not almost always, put you in His waiting room. Have you ever spent time in God's waiting room? It's confusing because we think to ourselves, I should be moving, I should be doing things. Things should be happening in my life, and they're not. We wait. You can count on the fact that there will always be a time lapse. Always. Habakkuk, the old prophet, you can almost hear him talking. He's this wise old man in the back of the 2nd chapter. It says, God says these things I plan won't happen right away. Slowly, steadily, surely. The time approaches when the vision will be fulfilled. In phase 3, when we get to the delay phase, we're sitting in the waiting room, we start to ask questions like, when is this thing going to happen? When am I going to have my prayers answered? When am I going to get married? When are we going to have kids? When are the kids going to get out of the house? It's the waiting phase. We hate to wait, though. And so many times, what we do in the waiting room will determine how long we stay in the waiting room. We hate waiting in traffic. We hate waiting in grocery store lines. We hate waiting in doctor's offices. And we hate waiting to open Christmas presents. We hate waiting. But what we do during the waiting is going to determine how long we wait. The thing we hate worst of all is when we have to wait on God. You ever been in a hurry and God isn't? Well, that really describes most of our life, doesn't it? Every believer, every great believer, has spent time in the University of Wait. Some of you have not got your degree there yet because of what you're doing in the waiting room. Noah had to wait 120 years from building the boat to the first drop of rain. Abraham had to wait 99 years to have a son to become the father of a great nation. Moses had to wait 40 years in the wilderness before he could go back and get the children of Israel out. And then the Bible says he wandered around the wilderness for another 40 years. Joseph spent time in prison before God raised him up to become a mighty ruler of Egypt. God anointed David as a king, but then David had to spend years waiting to become a king and many times hiding. Jesus came to be the Messiah of the world, but God put him in a carpenter's workshop for 30 years, preparing him to become the Messiah. Why is it that we have to wait? It's because it's in the waiting phase, the delay phase, that I learned faith. Delay in the Bible never destroys God's plan for you. Delay does not mean denial. Delay means that he is preparing me. And there's many times that you'll hear people's testimonies that it didn't happen immediately the way that God thought that God was going to do it. But then in retrospect, they look back and they say, you know what? If I would have gotten it too soon, I would have been able to handle it. It's what I do in the delay stage that will determine how long that phase waits. So we begin with a dream. God gives everybody a dream. We've discovered today that only 10% of the people will pursue it. So 10% of us will decide, I want to do it. I'm going to give my life for this. Then I go to the delay phase. So now I'm finally out of the waiting room. Look what the next phase is according to the scriptures. Difficulties. We go from a dream to a decision to a delay to difficulties. It's at this stage that you start wondering to yourself, thinking, have we really gotten the right message? Am I on the right channel? Did I really take the right turn, or am I wandering around in the wrong place? The difficulties will be revealed to you in several sources, circumstances. Maybe I'm not smart enough to do this. Maybe I'm not rich enough. Maybe I'm not strong enough. Maybe I just missed it. Or critics. Critics that tell you it can't be done, you're stupid, you're wasting your time. You can't do that. You know what I have discovered in my life is that the louder the critics get normally means I'm closer to success. It's people who say that I can't do it is when God says it's almost like heavenly sandpaper, that he's really refining me. He's preparing me for that which is ready to come. Moses led the people through the wilderness after a 40-year delay. Now, if that's not enough, it says as soon as they got out into the wilderness, they ran into difficulties. They didn't have clean water. They didn't have food. And if that's not worse, you think, what could be worse than not having food and not having water? It's the next thing in the sentence where it says they ran into snakes. Well, I tell you what, at that point, I'd be ready to turn around and go back. I don't even like looking at a book where there's a snake on the page. If they put a commercial, and I don't know why they do this, just randomly, they'll put a snake someplace, and I got to turn the station as fast as I can. I don't like snakes. So they 40 years of a delay, they get into the wilderness, no water. Well, I can live with that. No food. Well, I can live with that. Snakes, no. I'm out of here. Difficulties. Joseph gets his dream of becoming a great ruler, okay? He knows that God has planted this idea in his mind that he's going to become a great ruler, but then that's when he gets betrayed by his brothers. He gets thrown into a pit. He's sold into slavery. He's falsely accused of rape, and then he sits in prison for years. He got the dream, the delay, the difficulties. Joshua takes him into the promised land after 40 years. And I think this is such an important verse that most people miss when they're reading through the scripture, that Moses takes the children of Israel out into the wilderness. They finally, after 40 years, they get into the promised land flowing with milk and honey, this land where they dreamed about. And you know what the first sentence in basically the first chapter, a few sentences in Joshua says? And in the promised land there were giants. And in other words, it wasn't going to be handed to them, over to them, that they would have to fight the giants in the land. Peter says it like this in 1 Peter 1:6. He said, at the present time you're temporarily harassed by all kinds of trials. This is no accident. It happens to prove your faith, which is infinitely more valuable than gold. Okay, so you see what we're doing so far. I started with a dream. I've got the dream in my mind. processed it, and I've decided I'm going to go for this. After the decision is made, God says, great, now hurry up and go to my waiting room. So we sit in God's waiting room. We've already decided that how long I stay in here is going to determine what I do in there. So after the delay, God says it's time to get moving, and now we run into the difficulties. The snakes, and the water, the prison, all of those kinds of things. So finally we get through the difficulty stage. We're ready to put our arms around this dream. Phase number 5, the dead end. You have now just moved from the difficult to the impossible. A lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about, where you're thinking, I'm ready to do this, I want to do it with all of my heart, and now I have hit the impossible. I can't do it. My marriage has gotten off to an impossible impasse. My career is going down the drain. My life is falling apart. I'm backed into a corner. There's no way out. I'm out of gas. I'm out of money. My situation is hopeless. It's over. If that's where you are, then I want you to know that you're in good company. Because you are in the company with the greatest achievers in all time, both in modern history and the Bible. Paul talks about the difficulties that he encountered in 2 Corinthians. He says, we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about the hardships that we suffered in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired even of life. Indeed, in our hearts, we felt the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely upon ourselves, here it is, but on God who raises the dead. That when God gets me to this point and he's ready to deliver this dream to me, he wants to make sure that I know that it's not me and that it's him. That he takes me through this process so that when I get it, it's a team and it's not just me. If God can raise people physically from the dead, then he can raise me emotionally from the dead, relationally from the dead careers, health problems. If God put life back into a dead body, then God can do anything. So my faith is dependent upon what he can do and not what I can do. God tells Abraham that he wants him to become the father of a great nation. Then God tells him to wait 99 years before he has a baby. Talk about dead ends. 99 years old, you're going to become the father of a great nation. You've got this dream, you've had it for a long time, and you don't have any children. Dead ends. Abraham looks at himself, and when the angel tells him that he's going to have this baby, he looks down at his whole body and he says, you know what, there's no way. There is no way that I can have a child. And then he looks over at Sarah, his 90-year-old wife, and says, it ain't going to happen. Impossible. The Bible tells us that when God told Sarah that she was going to have a baby at 90 years old, she laughed. Now we know for sure that she didn't believe him, because if she would have believed him, she wouldn't have laughed, she would have cried. 90 years old, going to have a child. But when the baby is born, they named him Isaac. And you know what Isaac means? Laughter. Because they thought it was so funny. It was impossible for this to happen. But God, with his sense of humor and the way that he plans things, that she is 90 and he's 100. God often lets our problems become impossibilities. The disciples followed Jesus thinking that he's going to be the Messiah. They are ready to lay their lives down. They have sold everything. They are on the road. They have lived with him for 3.5 years. They're believing that he is going to set up this kingdom. And then they look up and he's hanging on the cross. And then it gets worse than that. They find out that he's dead. You see what I'm talking about here? He takes us through this process. And then when we get ready, where we think we're ready to have it, then the impossible happens. God is ready to do something in our lives, but you have to realize that what he's going to do is going to be bigger than you, and it's going to be out of your hands. The best example of this is when Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt. They had been slaves for 40 years. That was the delay phase. Then after 10 plagues, Pharaoh says, get them out of here. And on their way out, Pharaoh changes his mind and he starts sending his armies after him. You saw this in the movie, Charleston Heston. He's taking them through, and the Red Sea parts and all of Pharaoh's armies coming in behind them. On both sides of them is impassable mountains. In front of them is a Red Sea that is deep and it's mighty. And the mighty army is coming in behind them. They are at a dead end. I've shared with you before, that's one of my favorite passages in the Bible. You'll miss it if you don't know this, that where they were standing, right there at the edge of the Red Sea, with all this impossibleness around them, was called Beelzebub. Beelzebub means that, it literally means God's hidden treasure. They were exactly where they were supposed to be with God. But had it not been for their dependence upon God, they would have been lost, right on the verge of receiving their dream. So you see the phases that God is going to take us to. We're going to break these phases down bigger time as the next few weeks go over, because I really want us to be able to identify and know exactly where we are. It begins with the dream, then we make a decision, then there is a delay, then there is the difficulties, then we hit the dead end, and then finally, phase number 6, the deliverance. When getting to the dead end, I should not give up. I should look up, and I should expect God to intervene and step in. Paul says in 2 Corinthians, he has delivered us, and he will deliver us again. The Red Sea splits, and they walk across on dry land. God provides a ram for Abraham. Joseph's dreams do come true. Jesus is resurrected. You see, God loves to turn crucifixions into resurrections. He loves to turn dead ends into deliverances. Because when it happens, then God gets the glory and all of the credit. Man's impossibilities are simply God's opportunities to show his greatness. It's a teamwork. It's something that you do together. My dreams. My dreams will cause my faith to be challenged, my heart to be awakened, my creativity to be released, my character to be forged, my God to be honored, my destiny to be fulfilled, and my generation to be influenced. David says in Psalm 27, I'm expecting the Lord to rescue me again, so that once again I will see God's goodness. God has got something phenomenal that's going to happen in your life. It's going to happen in this church's life. It's going to happen in your life personally. But every time, in every circumstance, in every situation, God takes us through a process. Understanding the process is one of the most important things that we could ever do in order to accomplish the dream. So my challenge to you today as we conclude our time together is to dare to dream. Let nothing hold you back from exploring your wildest fantasies, your wishes, and your aspirations. Don't be afraid to dream big and to follow your dreams wherever they may lead you. Open your eyes to their beauty. Open your mind to their magic. Open your heart to their possibilities. Dare to dream. Whether they are in color or in black and white, whether they are big or small, easily attainable or almost impossible, look to your dreams and make them become reality. Wishes and hopes are nothing until you take the first step toward making them happen. Dare to dream, because only by dreaming will you ever discover who you are, what you want, and what you can do. Don't be afraid to take risks, to become more involved, to make a commitment. Do whatever it takes to make your dreams come true. Always believe in miracles, and always believe in what God can do with you.